ban list.
USA Gymnastics had a banned list, a list of coaches who, because of certain behaviors or allegations, were not allowed to coach. And it's never been quite clear to me what the criteria really were for getting on the banned list. Because a lot of coaches who should have been on it were not.
I knew things about Don Peters, this is back in 1979, about him and issues that had come up. I knew about it because being the little kid in the sport at the time, I think the adults kind of would just forget I was there. You know how families do, and they talk in front of the kids because they think the kids don't get it. Well, I got it. I knew everything they were saying, and I knew they were saying pretty bad stuff about Don Peters. And then he became the national team coach, the world championship team coach, the Olympic coach, and they knew, everybody knew, but he's in charge, and so nobody's gonna say anything. I knew about it in 1979. Don Peters being put on the banned list didn't come about till, I want to say 2011. And I know for a fact, I had a 45-minute discussion with Steve Penny to explain to him exactly what I knew about Don. Steve's response to me was, well, only 2 women have come forward against Don. I think I was silent for a little bit, and I asked him at that point, well, how many people need to have come forward with this stuff? Is it 6? A dozen? What?
The Indy Star opened an investigation in 2016 that kind of covered cases in USA Gymnastics that didn't go through to final stages and didn't get past initial investigations. And it just showed a kind of backlog that really showed the culture of USA Gymnastics was not about listening to victims or listening to people who made complaints about coaches. Especially, there were a lot of cases of sexual abuse that just weren't taken seriously and weren't handled.
It's just unbelievable the things that were gotten away with. And now we're seeing so many predators that were in our sport for so many years too, because there weren't checks and balances. All people cared about was they just wanted medals. They were hungry for medals and success. The coverage was catapulting these people that harmed so many gymnasts because of how the broadcast was glorifying the Carolis. But yet nobody had the confidence and courage to speak up because they were scared of the backlash.
Bella and Marta kind of created this is how you need to be to make champions. And to me, it's like a cult. Leaders of the cult were all about money and medals, and if there's sacrifice in a cult, then the sacrifice was the gymnasts, the athletes, the sacrifice of their physical, mental, emotional well-being.
There were probably quite a few athletes that had that kind of trauma. And if you were from an Eastern European country and you had no voice about anything, back then, and I think part of the problem and the influence that came to this country was that you could get away with anything in some of the other countries. There were no restrictions. In fact, Olga was somewhat shunned because she was a little more outspoken.
First time in 1990s, start to talk about sexual abuse, but they attacked and said it's not true, that's a lie. Renal Knish was a very talented gymnastic coach. He was very creative. Sometimes he brought me element impossible to do, and he was a good coach, but in the real life, he was a monster.